So, welcome, Bridger. It's been a minute. I told you a little bit about Burn the Map. We talked about this a year or two ago where I was just going, I wanted to sit down with nifty people doing slightly crazy things and hear some really cool stories. I know your story a bit. I don't think I know your full story. I want to, if it's okay, I kind of want to start from the beginning a little bit as far as like singularity. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
How did you get into the psychological, organizational psychology, and everything else in the first place? Because I mean, when I met you, you were already doing it.
Yes. My background in therapy, makes me want to back up all the way to like my childhood. So I don't know how far
Sure.
back we want to
Why?
go, but
Do it. Do
I,
it. I want to hear
I,
because, yeah.
I love, I would have characterized this as I love psychology, but the truth is I've come to just learn I love consciousness. I like thinking and studying and speculating about consciousness itself
What does
and
that mean?
humans. And
What does the word consciousness mean in that
well, that
context?
so you said to me, so first of all, science cannot agree on a good definition of consciousness. Like there is not a consensus at all. There's a lot of things science, a definition of consciousness is not something that we have a good definition of. So things range from like, what is conscious? Rocks? Are rocks conscious? You'd think not. But then some people start to argue, well, doesn't it follow or adhere? I would contend, you said to me, I would contend that consciousness requires some degree of self-awareness
Sure.
or
So,
ability to
right?
reproduce or
I think, therefore, I am, right?
yes, I think therefore I am. And then you could add, right? I feel therefore I am. Uh,
Mhm.
I would add also that experiencing acknowledging self, acknowledging others, acknowledging thought, that to me is consciousness. So I've been obsessed with that since I've been satisfied with my answers to my biological and psychological questions. So I like thinking about consciousness. That's where this has all started.
When did that turn into therapy?
Well, I would say the therapy turned into that, but therapy is something I think I've always known since I was a teenager. If you would have asked me when I was 17 or so what I wanted to do, I'd say either a therapist or a National Geographic photographer. Those were the two things I was interested in. And I definitely went the therapy route. I didn't choose for a long time. I did a lot of good photography in my 20s. But the truth is that I mean, therapy was helping people has been a passion. I
Mhm.
think that I have a bug of trying to do my part in contributing to the human condition or reduction of suffering in the uh, human condition in our process in our life. So that's where it's all started. I like that on a
Beautiful.
fundamental level, and I like to speculate, like I say, about consciousness. It has led to me wanting to like I really have believed in AI since way early.
Mhm.
That's why I gravitated to learn more about wrench when
Sure.
it was you're the only AI truly AI CEO I knew or person I knew that was really in that tech space. And so
Appreciate it.
and I suppose I like speculating about that because I do consider it a consciousness or coming to a consciousness. It's becoming one now, right?
I've heard people, other friends that are therapists say, like, yeah, most people become therapists because they're trying to fix themselves. Were you trying to fix yourself, or it really was other? You are one of the more empathetic people I've ever met in my entire life. You genuinely, right? You do.
I do care. That's
Yeah.
something I've never been accused of is lacking care or passion in this process for anything or anybody. So yes, I do care.
What were you dissatisfied with? I mean, you and I, so for people listening, if you are listening, the one, my mom's going to listen. But I mean, you and I worked on building out some behavioral models, right? I've
Uh-huh.
always been fascinated because I'm fascinated with human behavior, but like largely through a telescope. You're the empathy side with it. I'm fascinated by like how things get done type stuff. Why
Yes.
people make decisions the way they do. I've always been fascinated with persuasion, and a lot of the stuff that I got into was largely because I always liked spy stuff. I always loved the fascination of like interrogation. I always thought it.
Interrogation techniques.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I always loved James Bond movies and stuff. I always
Oh,
thought I'd
James
be.
Bond is the best.
Yeah, yeah. But anyways, the the nature of that kind of human behavior, and oftentimes people are going again. They're going. The therapist is usually the most fucked up person in the session.
I don't doubt that that's true. Um, I guess that it wasn't my answer that I went in to fix myself, but certainly that's likely true, and certainly I have been the biggest beneficiary of my years of therapeutic experience. Certainly that's true, and that it's changed me and helped me more than anybody that I know. So that's certainly true.
So
So
how do you go from there to like, and I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, in terms of like the phenomenon. Singularism as an organization is relatively new in terms of like comparison. But how did you get into the? Because like for people that don't know, Bridger knows more than literally anyone I've ever come across by a long shot in terms of like what would you call it? Disc profiles, Myers Briggs,
oh
Big
yeah.
Five Ocean, Hexaco. I mean, I still reference you when people go like, "Hey, which one do you use?" I'm like, "Well, I talked to the smartest guy I know on that, and that was Bridger. He knew the pros and cons of like all of those different tests, what they did do well, did not do well, trade offs, and everything, and all of that fun stuff associated with them. Like, when did that turn into? Well, because I guess you were working on mental gurus was a thing.
Hmm.
You were going. That was actually why we met originally, right? I wanted, if I remember you correctly, non psychopharmacological solutions to mental problems
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
Meaning, you wanted to basically see if you could get medicinal utility out of non medicine activities. Can I get someone
Well,
to
yeah,
CrossFit and get the same thing I could out of a Prozac pill or something?
I think not only so first of all, the very premise of that question implies that like somehow that's our initial intervention. And I'm like, the thing that baffles me is just yesterday I was talking to somebody that's like, do you think I need Xanax to help me with this? And I'm like, first of all, no one needs it. It was just invented. No one needs it. There's no such thing as a Xanax deficiency in your body. There's no Ambien deficiency in our bodies. There's no Adderall or
Mm-hmm.
Lexapro deficiency in our bodies per se.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very recent invention that we were coping with just fine before it happened.
Sure.
So I do want to address what I said earlier, that part of my goal and mission has always been the alleviation of suffering. And, I said it at first by contributing to the human condition. And some part of me has become very aware, and I want to be careful how I say this, but that suffering is not, like the reduction of suffering, I would say has been my vision and goal. But I would also say it might not be the highest aim of all the aims that people can choose between, in that just reducing suffering might not be a good idea for mankind entirely. We would gladly dip ourselves into, like, okay, let me be careful, but I want to say, there was a comedian in like the year 2000 I was listening to. This is like 25 years ago.
Huh?
And he said, the last invention we'll ever make is the holodeck. We're just going to mass produce holodecks, slide ourselves in it, and be getting pleasure and no suffering for the rest of our lives until there's just no more humans left to build holodecks. The,
Yeah.
the joke was that that would be the last invention. And I think that there's truth to that joke, that a reduction of suffering might not be in our best interest. Suffering compels a lot of our progress, our our civilization, our motivation to become better. And I'm not saying that it's a good idea to try to cause suffering, but complete avoidance of all suffering will only put us in a cocoon or a bubble. So back to the Xanax. I do wonder, you have to wonder, what problems are we causing by avoiding all of the suffering that
Hmm.
we take in with medications, which I am not vehemently opposed to. I'm like, medications have their place, but I do wonder to what degree we're just solving problems by avoiding problems.
So
And that's
I heard someone talking about something relatively recently, but they were talking about like your emotions, but yeah, I think that's the right term. Correct me on this, but your emotions are closer to something like a teeter totter, where like they need a counterbalance, and like if
yeah.
when you
Yeah.
go to the gym, you're kind of actually having the equivalent of a stressful interaction. You're having a stressful event, but you're actually
Hmm.
having it in a controlled environment in such a way that like you go, hey, this is actually a healthy way to get all of that stress and that negation out, so that when you go home, you've already gotten it out of your system. The teeter totter now has tipped towards sadness early in the morning, and you actually have a better day because you've already gotten a ton of that sadness out of your system. And what you have left is the happiness to counterbalance it.
I,
That theory.
I, I don't mind that theory at all.
Then, okay, so
Ooh.
singularism. How do you get from that statement of like we don't necessarily need it? How do you get introduced to like psychedelic therapy, and what does it do that's so different that would actually give
Okay.
it a pass?
So psychedelics for me, even at the beginning, it was, I have a few different times I would call the beginning of that journey for me.
All right, we're back. We had to pause for a second, and so I was asking you, how do you go from the medicinal thought to the who needs Xanax, but simultaneously go to the psychedelics and go, okay, wait, these do work, do help. How do like what do you call it?
Okay.
Square that circle that square, or whatever for me. How do those simultaneously
How
exist?
does so first of all, I wouldn't state that my only goal is reduction of psychotropics. I think
Mhm.
psychotropics have their place and are good. I was debating something recently with my daughter actually, and she was making great points. And I pointed out we didn't need any of these things, you know, beyond a few hundred years ago or a few dozen years ago. And she made the point. She goes, well, then what about all this? And she motioned to all the rest of my house. Like, well, we're using a lot of things we didn't have a few hundred years ago. Shade. And I go, you're right. Part of me wants to argue, I'm not sure we're any better off than people were on the savannah or the tundra in terms
Possible.
of happiness of full grown adults as we make it. Certainly we have a lower death. So I suppose, first of all, we have to prove a really good reason why we have civilization at all. And then I go, okay, but if we're going to decide to use technology as a species, then where do you draw the line between doors and psychotropics? And is the line between doors and psychotropics and running water and heated pools and like where is the line where we are reducing our suffering enough that it is causing more problems than benefit?
This is a good
And
point.
does that make
So
sense at
oh
all?
yeah, yeah, yeah. All the time. I hear it all the time. I mean, you hear like, is it Jonathan Haidt put out a bunch of stuff on kids and cell phone and social media use, and he's like, if anything, it's actually potentially making them weaker. They actually have kind of like the same number, if not more, of kind of like psychological issues. Just again, because to kind of the teeter totter point from earlier is like we're kind of built to be able to deal with both, and we almost need both. And so for that reason, like you may feel more comfortable, you will find a way to become uncomfortable because we're programmed to be uncomfortable. There's no such thing as like, there's no free lunches in nature. um
No, there's really not. Okay, so to your question about psychedelics and medication, let's not state the goal is the entire reduction of meds so much as it is what is the goal of psychedelics? What is the help that psychedelics offer humans and mankind?
hmm.
And I mean, it's hard for me. It's hard to narrow it down to one or narrow it down to the best one. Or should I take the argument that we have grown in tandem? I'm very much influenced by biological explanations and very influenced by how evolutionary psychology and how we've been influenced by biology. So I always go back, how did we evolve to be? And where in balance with suffering and happiness and pleasure are we supposed to be? And then also, where in nature did we grow symbiotically with things? And to me, I would think that nature isn't going to give us problems unless a solution has come with it. And a solution will naturally come with any biological problem that we have, because that is how evolution works. Evolution is constantly following changes in the environment, and changes in the environment cause problems. Suffering then causes these beings to adapt to those changes. So I would think a natural thing to our suffering and our realization of pain and trauma and what trauma does and why trauma exists, there would be natural solutions coexisting with us naturally that we haven't invented. So I think the first thing to point out is that solutions are in nature, even speaking from an evolutionary biological standpoint, let alone just a philosophical or reasonable standpoint. I don't think evolution made us to just suffer. We could take a cold approach to it, a meaningless approach, you might argue, and say, well, at the very least, nature made us to reproduce and to exist, even if to suffer. And the immediate solution would be, well, then nature, we wouldn't have survived our own suffering if we didn't want to reproduce and pass things on, just speaking evolutionarily. And the natural answer to that then is that there must be solutions to our suffering out there. So it's just following biological explanations. Our adaptations would create solutions to our own problems. And I believe that our brains are meant to get traumatized and meant to experience itself and consciousness, meant to recognize one another, and then meant to continually seek happiness and solutions. So you know this problem people have all the time of I'm not enough. That is a phantom common issue feeling. I'm not enough for my job. I'm not enough for my children. I'm not enough for my parents. I'm not enough for my world. I'm not enough for my family. I'm not enough for my spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend. I am not enough, right?
Yeah.
It's a common problem. I think that
imposter syndrome type thing.
What's that?
Imposter syndrome type thing?
Yes. Let me think. Is it imposter syndrome? For some, it will grow into imposter syndrome. And for others, it's just an endless berating of yourself. So there's a joke. You can Google this online, but it's a meme. And it's like, there was a framed picture selling at Ross or TJ Maxx or something. And it just said, I am enough, 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 I am enough. And the joke was on the meme, for just $20, you can tell every guest you ever have at your house what issues you have, by hanging that on the wall. But whenever we are failing, there is a phantom feeling in the back of our mind. We are not enough for this position. We are not enough for this job. We are not enough for our spouse. And it comes up when we're usually failing. And by the way, 90% of existence is 90% of the success, they say, is failing. That means that everybody that's trying to do whatever they're trying to do is failing at some portion of the amount of time if they're succeeding. So
I've always heard that.
What's that?
I've only those that try get the luxury that is the sense of failure, right? They like
yes. Only those that try get the luxury.
It's kind of a twist, because it was Muhammad Ali that said, like, only those that have been, it's to some extent paraphrasing, but he's like, only those that have failed understand the sting, that when it really, really matters, understand how bad that sting is, that they'll come back with enough energy to win when it really matters and counts. Meaning, you have to understand failure like first to win, right? Like,
the first to fail or the first to win? Is that what you just said?
Yeah. Like, I'll see if I can find it, but it is one of those, like, you have to know what failure feels like before you ever get to feel a win, right? Like, it has to come in that.
That sounds very accurate to me. And it's telling that it comes from a champion like that. Of course, a champion like that would be able to tell you a lot about failure and loss and striving for and not achieving before achieving. You couldn't expect a winner, a champion in any field to not know that feeling. That sounds accurate to me.
We put my kid in, I taught him chess because I wanted him to know, well, we put him in chess, and one of the first activities we got him into was MMA, just because MMA is grappling. It's not necessarily, punching, but we wanted him to know exactly what it was like to get his ass kicked mentally and physically over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and get right back in and do it again. Right. Like, just
right.
You need to be comfortable with that sense of like, yeah, this is what getting my ass kicked feels like. Let's do it again. I want him numb to that premise so that his persistence grit is built up. So
right.
I like anyways, one of my little nuance.
That sounds very accurate.
The psychedelics, how do they do it? What do they do that's so different?
So what we have grown in tandem with medicines in the world is, so our sickness, part of the sickness that can be addressed by psychedelics, let's start there, is an illness of our own constructs that we then put together. So you have to say, well, what aren't you enough measuring up against? You're not enough for your own trauma. You're not enough for your own pain. You're not enough for the suffering. You're not enough for life or your job or your, all these things. What are the things you aren't doing well enough? And then you go, okay, those things were taught to me. I have to be enough to do them by my mother or my father or my peers or my observation of my neighbors. And you put these internal pressures on yourself to measure up, to grow. What psychedelics, I guess I'm going to speak mostly to psilocybin today.
That's the main one. It's not like
that's my passion, right? That's the one.
The active element in shrooms.
Yes. So magic mushrooms or psilocybin, the active, serotonergic molecule within them. Psychedelics and psilocybin have the potential. What they do is they go in and they act as serotonin in your mind. It's a simple way to put it, and I'm skipping a few steps, but it mimics serotonin in your mind. Serotonin increases things like your openness, your confidence, your love, and your sense of well-being and sense of that. And again, I'm still oversimplifying and generalizing to what it does for most people. But as it does that, it allows you to see, and this is the key line, if I were to narrow it down, it allows us to see ourselves clearly and without the constructs that are causing anxieties for us. We live in anxieties like a fish lives in water. And it's even hard to explain what the default mode network is to a person because we are living so consistently in that mode. It's hard to see. And so it's like Alan Watts talked a lot about explaining water to a fish. It would be really hard to explain water to a fish because you'd say, well, the fish would say, well, what is water? And we'd say, well, it's all around you. It's everywhere. It's everywhere that you aren't is water. And it's not like a solid, another moving thing. And I'd be like, okay, wait. So you're saying it's everywhere and all around and it's in it. Well, what is the difference between water and not water? It would be hard to grasp this concept for a smart fish and exactly what water is. That is how much we live in pain and suffering. We are living in it all the time. It's a wonder that people escape. And what I would say is our brain is made to balance it out. We are made for pleasure and pain. But suffering seems to be a compelling and underwriting motivation for us to compel us as humans to survive, first of all, but even to survive each other and to conform to one another's social constructs and to one another's assertions of how we should live. And the reason we have it is because we live socially. We're such hyper social creatures that we live in this. And so what psilocybin does, to repeat myself a little bit, is it comes into our mind and it mimics openness and happiness, and it mimics serotonin so well that it allows us to see ourselves and our lives. And so far I've just talked about it chemically, but it allows us to see ourselves so well and deeply that we can see ourselves without the filters of those constructs. And that is key. That is key to understanding consciousness. It's key to understanding ourselves. It's key to understanding and relating and empathizing with others. It's key to lowering our defenses so we don't feel like we have to defend anything, and then we can hear and empathize and truly see one another. And that is paramount in removing our suffering. It's paramount process in having spiritual experiences. I would even say it is an essential component to understanding the universe and our place in it, our role.
I've done psilocybin. I'm actually an advocate. Like, I've told my parents, who are very Mormon, I'm like, you should do this before you die for sure. I am definitely from the camp of, if I recall correctly from my research on it, it's almost impossible to overdose. Yes, people have bad trips, so you don't want to be in a bad mindset to do it. By the way, singularism, when did you actually start singularism?
I suppose formally in the fall of 2022, I filed to get the 501c3 organized. The truth, it was years before that it was about 2017 that I first started thinking. But 2017 when I started recording some videos and I made the name. And so, yeah.
The premise originally was self-help therapy. Was it always meant to be psilocybin therapy?
Yeah, I mean, singularism was, but singularism, yeah. I mean, let me speak more to the age in which we're in with singularism.
Go for it.
Where we're doing more therapy. Like I would say therapeutic and helpful, mentally helpful exercises and ceremony with singularism. Okay. So for those that don't know, they're listening, singularism is a religion. It is something that I founded feeling compelled and even called to in the way that this podcast is designed to cover, right?
Takes balls to start a religion, my friend.
Yes. It does go back to religion. And so when I was being cross-examined by my opposition in court, they were like, well, your mission sounds a lot like the Hippocratic Oath, not a religious one. And I was like, yes, I leaned in to the mic and I go, yes, I very much like the Hippocratic Oath. And what I'd like to add is, well, the Hippocratic Oath is a religious oath. It was always a religious oath. It was, in fact, a secret that they wouldn't even tell other people. When the Greeks invented it, it was only for the educated.
Really?
And the elite within the Greek religion related to other philosophies and religions they have. Religion and philosophy hail from the same branches.
Start a religion.
How does one start a religion?
Yeah.
Okay.
You file a form?
Like logistically or like spiritually?
Kind of both.
Pray on your own, like meditate and pray. I don't even mean the way you may have been taught growing up. I just mean meditate, converse with yourself. You can start it that way. Converse with the deepest parts of yourself. And I want to say, let's stop this shenanigan false construct that religion needs to be as formally organized as it's been. That's what turns us off to it. And I realize that with some degree of irony, that because I have formally organized a religion. But I say, well, why? Because I had to live in a society. And then you go, well, why did we have to? And I go, well, the Constitution explains this really well right when it's founded. They say, what I think they were existentially questioning themselves as the founding fathers. And they sat there and they go, what gives us the ability to form a government and to govern? If we're going to overthrow the king right now and we're going to branch off, what gives us the authority? And they decided the authority has to be given by us, the people, we the people. And it needs to be given because we have inalienable rights. And in order to establish a more perfect union, I'm paraphrasing all over, but sure. I'm following a line of reasoning. In order to establish a more perfect union, to protect inalienable rights, we need to govern ourselves and protect it from tyrants. And so we don't know how to do this better than others, but we coming together in this state, I mean, imagine how scary it was breaking off from monarchy, of the most powerful monarchy, and thinking, I think that they wrote those lines because they had to reason their own way through imposter syndrome. I think they sat there and they're like, are we monarchs? How do we avoid becoming what we hate? Right? Yeah. I think they sat there and they had to reason it out. To protect inalienable rights, we have to form a more perfect union. they realized that they were going to form something imperfect.
It's like the Gandhi thing, you can be the change you want, or you can react to the change you don't want. And they just went, no, if we don't, someone else will decide it for us, and they're not going to decide it in our favor, right?
So in that same token, I looked at singularism and I go, what gives me the right? And I would say, first of all, my own relationship with God is all I need. And then the next step is, how do I help others have a close relationship with God who I can help? And then I say, if you have your own, you don't need this. I'll existentially committed to that premise. You don't need any organized religion. You can do this in your own mind and your heart. I have organized one because I would like to unify the people that are like-minded thinkers and that need the psychedelics as much as I did. And for those people and for those that it calls to, I welcome. And I'm like, great, come and in sincerity and in a state of personal declaration of who you are, you can do it legally within the framework of our ceremonies that we work incessantly to make safe and procedural and also clinically influenced and clinically, to the degree we can, clinically sound, but also without making any claims of clinical licensure and without making claims that we are the authority. And that's what they had a problem with. They said the definition of religion in court, they challenged us on this a lot. They said the definition of religion is that you claim to have the answers to life's most important questions, the biggest questions that philosophers and psychologists and theologians and theists have asked for centuries. And they said to me in court, I can't believe the audacity of this. They said, do you have the answers, Mr. Jensen, to all of life's biggest questions? And I said, no. And in fact, anybody who says they have that is the scam artist. I go, those are the guys you're looking for. Go find the ones that say they have the answers to life's biggest questions. Those are the people.
Wait, hold that thought, because I want to make sure, spoiler alert, the court. So wait, really quickly, before we get to that, because the court stuff is fascinating. You said the people that need this, talk about it, because like, I think I'm going to misquote it, but the efficacy of psilocybin, like what kind of chemical advantage does it give in terms of the therapeutic process, right? Like, what's the level up that it offers? Because I've heard,
I didn't say that in quite enough of a soundbite. I think the greatest single offering I would describe, this is a non-scientific description,
okay,
is that it lowers your default mode network, which generally for most people includes a lot of anxieties and filters you see yourself under. And it lowers this enough that you can experience life with just a raw consciousness, a simple understanding of who you are without your humanness, without your gender, and without even the mammal part of you. You can experience thought without all of the noise, and you can experience consciousness for some people without this. Now, when I said for some, there are some people that it is less effective for or ineffective on, and there are some people who it might complicate and harm their own perceptions of the world or make what we consider mental health conditions worse. And so we filter those people out through our screening, and we proceed with people that it's safe to do it with. Go ahead.
So, but like when you're doing it, when I say the like efficacy, so not necessarily the how, because I get that. But you hear stories about like an 18-month halo per dose. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That the side effects, the halo effects from a single psilocybin trip, whatever you want to call it, last as much as 18 months. You hear about people that are like, hey, I can quit smoking in one day. I figured it was worth 10 sessions or whatever. but like the efficacy of it versus a non, like a lot of people too, you hear like, yeah, hey, half of the therapeutic process is they want me to make sure they don't want to fix you because then you stop going. You know, like a lot of the things about even like psilocybin that from my own personal experiences, and granted, I've been I definitely recognize the medicinal use. I haven't used them in the medicinal, I haven't done a therapy session ever. But I've absolutely experienced the therapeutic value of it, of like, hey, yes, I did feel it, to your point, the veil or whatever, the fog was lifted. And I went, oh, that's why I think like that. Like you have this moment where all of a sudden you can see yourself as a little kid. You have that moment where you're like yelling or getting yelled at or whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, that's why I do that. I should quit doing that. And you do like figure shit out seemingly almost instantaneously. Yes, in a way that you're talking about, like it's almost like that stuff is raw and available and it hasn't been for one reason or another for ever.
For one reason or another. I used to think it was such a bunk conspiracy that the government would just say, we don't like that it would free people's minds, and so we're going to shut it down.
Yeah.
But that is what it was. And it really, like all those, it was essentially that. They would say, well, no, it's because it was hurting people's minds, or but the truth was, it was just causing people to think for themselves, and the people that would take it were protesting. And the government literally fought it for that reason. It's an accurate conspiracy theory, if you will. So I'm not really into conspiracy theories, but I think that one has
legit.
So
how did you get into it? So you founded Singularism. You got your facility. How do you have to grow them? How do you get the psilocybin?
I don't want to. The prosecutor is also very interested in that question, but I was quite transparent.
Don't tell me, fine.
Process. I stopped shy of saying exactly where, but they are from. Let's just leave that where it lies.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I did grow them for a while myself. That is accurate. But I have since just learned I will never grow as powerful and good and quality mushrooms as the ones that I can acquire from really good people now. And so that's where I've left it. I also say I obtain them legally, and that my whole process has been deemed to be legal from a judge.
How do you make it legal? How did you get to legal status?
Well,
because it's a religion, you have there's got to be, is there a certificate on the wall there somewhere? What's
that?
Is there like a certificate that you get sent from someone? Like religion wise, you are officially a religion certificate.
Yeah, we are
graduated from
and acknowledged religion, yes. A judge having looked at our religion and examined it, and then examined it against the definition of religion, and then even having expanded the definition of religion, seeing that we are sincere and safe and in need of the federal protection that we are entitled to under the Constitution. I suppose I didn't get a packet in the mail so much as I got an email with a PDF from a judge's court order.
Fair enough.
That's what I will land on. And okay. If we're talking about imposter syndrome, by the way, to have a court order come in and go, look, having scrutinized you, and everybody challenging sincerity and me believing in self-deception kind of messes with my head. Let me be honest with you about that. Because I'm going, okay. A few weeks ago, I did an interview with NPR, and she asked me, what gives you the right to take it upon yourself to make psilocybin part of your ceremonies? And I was like, I think, first of all, what gives me the right? And I was like, the Constitution. I don't know. Like, let's start there. That was a good document. But then I said, if my real answer underneath that is birth, consciousness. I have the right. Everything has taught us, like the whole concept of like own. Have you thought about how silly that concept is, to own something? This is a human invention. Own, or the word allowed. If you went to a pack of wolves, which have lots of rules, you wouldn't be able to explain to the wolf what ownership is of that carcass or that bone or that hole that is dug in the ground. Own is an invention. Allow is is an invention. Rights are an invention that we made to sustain civilization. And so, what gives me the right to start my own religion? I think we need to start with what took that right from me in the first place. Every human is entitled to utter syllables and words and think thoughts and commune with their own highest power. That is a, certainly an inalienable right. And
Sure.
so,
But the premise being too, I get the premise. Like if you, especially if you're going, the do no harm premise. You're going, look, what I do behind closed doors is my business, right? But also,
yeah, exactly.
you're implementing a system of it. How did you come to, like, you obviously have like, hey, here's how we do. What do you call them? Sessions.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how did you come to the methodology?
Certainly, I'm influenced by my background in therapy.
Yeah.
So even before the good research was coming out, I was like, well, this is the best therapy that there could be. I was always an alternative kind of therapist. My undergraduate degree was in recreation and leisure therapy, and therapy is helping yourself relax, essentially, or recreate. Then I got into adventure therapy and wilderness therapy and horticulture therapy and equine therapy, art therapy. I was I was I was in all these alternative therapy types while I was getting my master's, and then got my master's and did more traditional talk therapy for a long time, and then discovered psychedelics. And just, it was the obvious solution to be like, let's marry these two things. As I really look at it, though, I want to add, I do think that there are a lot of advantages to doing psychedelics, not just in a recreational setting, but to doing them in a therapeutic one and to doing them reverently. And so, while I am a big believer in recreation being therapeutic alone, and even in I respect safe recreational practices, I don't consider singularism to be recreational.
Yeah.
I consider our practice to be in effort to sustain us, in an effort to seek our highest selves and our highest potential, and our resolve our existential problems. That's what I consider the ceremony to be. And yes, in pursuit of reduction of our suffering, which we already talked about in the first half, which might not be the highest of all missions, but it is our mission in part at Singulars. Yeah.
Walk me through a ceremony. What's it like? What's the chronological setup process? What's the
We start with the I guess we start with a consultation and a screening, and it's a mutual screening. We want the people that we meet with to choose us just as much as we want to have the right to choose the people that voyage with us. So the screening, we screen for sincerity and we screen for safety. We screen that this is likely. I consider unethical to provide this service or this ceremony for somebody that it's not likely to help them meet their own goals. So we have them state their goals. Are they looking for a new connection with God, another connection with God, with their highest self, with themselves? We screen for that sincerity, the commitment, the safety. We screen that they have a calling to this. It's these 6 things. And finally, that it's ethical to provide the treatment to this individual who's doing it, with informed consent, who is doing it under no duress or pressure. And then after screening, then we have a prep session. So we have, first of all, they're supposed to learn about it and find us. Then they have a consultation. Then they have a preparation session, sometimes 2. So now they're almost 6 or 7 hours deep into it just with us before they even come in for their what's called our administration or guided session. Guided meaning guided by the medicine, and they come in with us and sit down, and we make through an advanced extraction method, as opposed to just consuming it. But we extract psilocybin with a tea, And by doing it at the right temperatures and the right method, we extract psilocybin and then have them drink this tea. And it so many benefits and powerful things and lots of things I could say. And I say lots of things. I myself consider myself a fairly skeptical person and rational person. I'm not an instant mystic, if you will. I consider myself to be very scientifically minded and rational and reasonable. But for all of those reasons, in biology or sciences or social sciences, I consider psilocybin to be universally a spiritual experience, and one that we are entitled to by whatever our higher power is, including if it is only the systems, like if God is the systems that we have evolved in and created ourselves in, that is no less magnificent and powerful to me than any other God that I've learned about or been taught about in any religion. I even think that Richard Dawkins, he's a influential atheist and very atheist. And he wrote The Greatest Show on Earth. He says, he refers to evolution as the greatest show on earth, and one that a lot of people are dismissive of, but it might be the most meaningful, powerful system of consciousness that exists in the universe. And he calls it the greatest show on earth. And I'm like, Richard, I want to say, to me, that the meaning that you attribute to that system, that is God. I think that Stephen, what's his name? Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking came to that same understanding before his death, that the systems that be are God. And if that is God, there is some intelligence, not the way we are intelligent, not the way animals on Earth are intelligent, but an intelligence that's an emerging intelligence from the systems.
Sure.
That is God. And if that is God, that's Stephen Hawking's God. And I think that would be Richard Dawkins' God. Did I say all those names right? Did I get them mixed up at all?
Yeah.
But yes,
you got them right.
That's
I gave you a
God.
premise. I remember talking to one of my CTOs a long time ago and asking him about like how you measure the efficacy of software developers. And I was like, is it output, code, number of lines written? And he was like, no, because oftentimes some of the best software developers, they'll sit for a while and then write some little piece of brilliant, simplistic 5 lines of code that does this fundamentally tiny task, but does it so efficiently that it can do it at a massive, massive scale and still retain its efficiency. So oftentimes he's like, yeah, like AI right now, if you go analyze the type of code that it writes a bunch of unnecessary garbage, right? It writes 10 times more code than it needs to write. It's actually in many senses like a bad developer because it wastes a ton of resources on things you don't need, where oftentimes the elegant, simple solution is oftentimes really the best indicator of that intelligence, right? So evolution in that sense is like we created a random system, but then the selective random traits that actually allow something to survive for a slightly longer period of time over a long enough repetitive cycle become the ones that emerge and actually start to do almost predictive. It's like from almost a bit of randomness and chaos, but on a long enough timeline has a very predictable result, right? It's like, it's a little tiny, you figured out some molecular thing that repeated enough times over a long enough time period, it actually has that brilliance show up, right? Where people
okay, so the system of evolution, whether in business or in coding, or even in what survives and doesn't get thrown out in your own home, it is that is evolution. That is a system, and an intelligence emerges from that system that is a type of intelligence. So we started this conversation talking about consciousness, and this is what I get excited about. Would you call a system of things like this conscious? Would that code that you just described, is that conscious in the way that it keeps surviving reiterations, and it keeps surviving. It was written by an intelligent creator that sat down and typed it out.
Mm-hmm.
It was then survived 1,000 iterations over the course of 15 years. And you look at the old code and you go, why isn't this one changed? Now, where that is on our Earth, that's sharks. Sharks have existed in their current form, or nearly their current form, for 100 million years. Mammals have been taken over this planet in the time sharks and turtles and alligators have been around. We are all new neighbors to those creatures. And how I would say the system by which they became an apex predator, that is a intelligence of its own and a wisdom of their way of surviving. The megalodon is really no different than a great white shark, just in size. So all that happened was it's adapted its size. It's been around for 100 million years. Does that make sense? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Intelligence or consciousness doesn't have to be just organic. It could be a collective of all of our actions.
Definitely, I get the premise. I mean, it's almost like it's not the intelligent designer. It's that there is intelligent design that almost exists separately as a function.
There you go.
Variable A plus variable B plus some sort of replicating feature or whatever is like, again, you can do some really, really tiny little, very simple rules that can expand and actually create incredibly cool, complex systems, right? So we get off, but I actually want to get to this.
Yes.
What happened? So you set up the facility. How long were you operating this? Like, you're in Orem. You're basically in Provo, Utah.
I am. The location where I'm sitting right now is Provo, Utah. Yes. All right. So first of all, for our listeners, you should explain why that's already funny to you as a Utah. Like, why is that funny? Tell me, Dan. I'm from Provo. This is.
So,
tell me, Dan.
I'm listening. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up in Utah. I love Utah. Provo is about half hour to an hour away, and I think I've been there 3-4 times in a significant way. Like, a bunch of us in Salt Lake don't go to Provo. It is Mormon Mecca. It is no joke where, like, I get looked at weird because I have a beard. It is the epicenter of Mormonity. And that's fine, but it's like when you guys think of the Stepford, Leave It to Beaver, the whitest community, homogenous, Mormon, conservative. It's a clean, nice, beautiful place in a beautiful, beautiful setting. But, like, to be fair, even some of us who love, and like, my whole family's Mormon. I got nothing against Mormons in any way, shape, or form. But that is kind of the joke of just like, it's Provo, right? Like, things change when you even go, you founded a religion with psilocybin involved.
I will acknowledge
in the most conservative community in the world, like, at least in the Western world.
Okay, so I will tell you an observation I've had being a Provo Utah, right? And that is that all of Utah says we're not the weird ones. To the out of state people go, we're not weird. It's the Utah Mormons, or it's the Utah LDS members, right?
Everybody's
and then Utah Mormons go,
yeah.
It's not us. It's those ones down in Provo. It's the ones in Provo.
Or
Utah County. And Utah County points to Provo. Lehigh and Springville and Payson, they're like, it's not us. It's Provo. And Provo goes, not us. It's BYU. And BYU goes, not us. It's all those out of state Mormons that come to BYU. It's all those out-of-state ones. We're the normal Utahns, but the out-of-state crazy conservative ones come to BYU from out of state. And then back to the cycle. Out-of-state ones go, it's not us, it's those Utah Mormons. Everyone doesn't want to be the weird one. So I don't know where I am because I grew up in the shadow of BYU. My father was a professor. And I'm not going to ignore that part of my history. I kind of enjoy it. I'll tell you something interesting about BYU, though. It had a wave of phenomenology and existentialism wash through it in the late 70s, and a bunch of cool things came out of it. Stephen Covey, the Bridger Institute. My dad wrote a book called Moral Reasoning with the co-founder of the Bridger Institute, which is a huge consulting firm based on a philosophy. And tons of these existential books. The Oxford Papers came out of BYU in the late 70s, early 80s, and that's my father's era. And I grew up in this neighborhood of professors and academians, including some that I've mentioned. Same neighborhood as Terry Warner and Stephen Covey, both my neighbors, and I knew both of them growing up. I don't want to say everything about what I know in their families and but there's great philosophy coming out of it. And I think in part because the religious conservatism produces existential thought in in defense of it or in escape of it. Because one thing that religion, even Catholics in the Renaissance, protected the way that thinkers protected themselves among religious conservatism is saying, preserve us the arts, preserve us the philosophy, preserve us the myths and the legends of our history and the humanities. Preserve us those things, and intellectual thought will continue. That right? You shook your head. What was that thought? Yes?
No.
Like the whole Da Vinci Code, that book, it's about how Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, and now I'm just naming Ninja Turtles, so go on to Donatello, right? But those people preserved free thinking through art, philosophy, mythology. That even when the Catholic Church was taking down sculptures that had a penis on it, they said, look, let's just preserve these as mythology. So all the archetypes, all the archetypal symbols in Greek mythology, they weren't destroyed because the Catholic Church said, as long as we call it mythology, we're all right. And to this day, they're teaching it in third grade and calling it mythology. It's religion, people. We are teaching religion to youth, calling it mythology, and it's great. I think art is religion. When we separate ourselves from our greatest thoughts by labeling it and then banning it, we are diluting the deepest part of who we are. And the government has had to do that to preserve the plurality of society and preserve everybody their rights. They're going to say, we're going to give everybody their religion. Now, that's the pushback that I get a lot. I get, hey, you mentioned this conservative place and the religiosity of the place I'm in.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. It's a little bit loaded in all over.
I mean, it's like the worst kept secret here is that the Mormons run the Utah government, right? Like there's weird rules all over this place. Like the state-run liquor stores. Yes. I mean, worst kept secret here, right? Like and they run and act as a government body to some extent, right? Like we have a recession in Utah and they decide to build a mall. Mormons do. It's actually like, if you're non-Mormon, by the way, don't move here. But the best thing about being non-Mormon in Utah is that everybody else pays additional taxes that get reinvested into the community and you don't have to pay them. So like your neighbors will take care of your neighborhood paying tithing and you don't have to. It's awesome. And it makes for a great place to live.
It is a system that survives. I want to say a good system, but it is the system, like that code you mentioned earlier, that survived, and it went through 1,000 iterations of itself to survive. But the bottom line is, it is a surviving religion, and a religion that survives becomes a religion, and a religion that doesn't survive gets remembered as a cult or a false thing.
Well, and that was their innovation, if you will, right? They were the ones that came up with, what did they call it? Modern day prophecy or whatever, but they basically modern day revelation. Mormons were very specifically about, hey, we have a living prophet that can adapt and modify learnings as we go, right? That's why they have a living prophet, right? Wait, so amongst all that, cops show up.
I'm so glad you keep going back to this story because I
want
to talk about.
I remember just talking to you and you're just like, yeah, the cops showed up. Okay.
Yes.
What happened?
Now, here's a fun thing. I want the skeptics, if you're listening, to listen in on this part, because I am one of those. I do not believe in astrology or numbers or all of the mystic stuff until I do. Because okay, please, if you don't like this, please don't. I mean, I want to say, just listen with an open mind for a second, because the day that this happened was just last November 11th. And 11/11 is a thing among mystic communities. But it happened on 11/11, and one of my followers, who I love so much, his name is Jake, and with his permission, we'll put a link to his bio or something in this. I want to give a shout out. But Jake sent me a screen. So I don't believe in this stuff. I didn't have an application, but he looks up my astrology on the thing. And it said, the day the cops come, I'll send you a screenshot to drop into this podcast. But it says that on this day, you're going to have some sort of run-in with law enforcement or some kind of inspection. It literally said that. And I was like, hey, well, I just had the inspection of my life, 2 hours detained while they had an unexpected search warrant on my facility. And yes, they come. There are a few suspect things, but I don't want to be pitted against them or accuse them of bad character right now. They said they forgot, all 5 of them forgot their webcams or their body cameras.
Oh,
and they certainly came with their kid gloves on. They didn't come in guns a-blazing. They had them. They had armor on, some of them, and I don't know what else, but they came in fully equipped, and it was their special unit team. It was essentially their SWAT team that came in. And is this what you want to know?
Yeah, I do. What time of day was it?
I called my lawyer. They implied that they would arrest me if I didn't comply, but I think in hindsight, they had no intention to arrest me. They knew that I would. So I led them right to our safe with our mushrooms and psilocybin, gave it to them, sat down, talked to them for 2 hours. It is funny. I was so nervous, right? But one funny thing is I kept asking my lawyer, should I answer that question? I don't mind answering the question, but should I? And my lawyer's like, no, probably not. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell him this one part. And I just couldn't. And they were grinning ear to ear like, this guy is telling us everything. And I was happy to. And in hindsight, my lawyer came back and I listened to the recording of my being detained. And it's hilarious. It's so funny. In the end of it, he asked me, he goes, okay, well, now that I'm done interrogating you, he goes, do you have any questions for me before we go with all of your stuff and your photographs of your scripture and taking everything? And I go, well, yeah. He had undercover come to one of my webinars, and he had gone through a consultation. He had come on here for a tour. And so I asked him, I said, now that you've been through the webinar and consultation and tour, would you like to proceed booking your rounds with us? And the whole room burst out laughing, and so did my lawyer. And I go, yeah, would you like to proceed? And so that was funny. I basically said everything that they wanted to hear as investigators.
You just told them I don't know. That's the weird thing is there's like, to some extent, like, well, anything that they would want to know, you would tell them without a warning. It's like, yeah,
that's right. There. I didn't change one thing that I would have said. And I'm like, okay, I was wondering why you were in such a hurry when you came on a tour. Now we can answer all of your questions, right? That's how I felt.
So they didn't arrest you, but they seized stuff. Did they put a cease and desist on the business or anything else?
No, so the harassment had actually begun a year earlier, but I didn't know it.
What's the harassment?
Closed my bank account. What's that?
What's the harassment?
Well, we later learned through discovery that they had my bank accounts closed, trying to shut us down.
Rude.
What's that?
Rude.
Yes. That cost us a lot of time and revenue, and then we operated without a bank account for a while, which is impossible as a business. Then they basically sent an undercover cop after a year and a half of practice. And by the way, this whole thing started when I wrote them letters, and I said, I'm opening this place, and I wrote the police chief, the mayor, the city council, and the district attorney, all letters. And I invited them to come on a tour and see what we're doing and hear our assertions of religious liberty. And I did all of that a year and a half before, and they did nothing. And that was a key part of the judge looking at this and being like, well, how much harm do you really think he was doing that? If you let him operate for a year and a half and you knew about him,
ultimately, the complaint, right? They're like, he's operating an open door drug business in the middle of Orem or something, right?
So we did it right from the beginning. I invited them, and then so then they had our bank accounts closed deliberately, and then they waited for me to just have to shut down, and then they sent in an undercover, thinking, okay, we're going to get this guy on drug distribution charges, and then instead, so I filed a lawsuit before they even, and I got to give a shout out to my good lawyer who had helped me uh, well, I want to say prepare and to prevent this, but in the end, we had to fight it. And he, in a week, produced this huge lawsuit. Do you want to see this? It's right behind me. Look at this.
Show me.
This is our filing and my evidence from the first week. Within a week, we had this ready.
Like
And now a lot of this is my own writing, my exhibits, my like right here you see the octodrant and the religious philosophy, the coordinates to like this is my
wow.
essentially this is my epistemology. This is what things are true or false or how we perceive them. This is our definition of what faith and knowledge or the deep mysteries. So I had all of these writings.
Looks like a university textbook more than a scripture, dude.
That is our scripture. And you see, their big question was, well, then why aren't you teaching all of your people all of your scripture? And I go, well, I am happy to, but the whole philosophy of our religion, the premise of our religion is that, and it goes back to your original question, well, what made you start a religion? And I'm like, it's between you and God. And so, or whatever God is to you. And if you are Richard Dawkins, your God might be the God of systems that created the greatest show on earth, which you wrote the book about. So I would contend that it actually stunts my voyage. We call them voyagers here. Our clients, our parishioners, our followers, they're voyagers. It stunts their ability to commune with God on their own and in their highest form, to tell them how I do it and what my revelations are. And so what is true for Bridger might not be true for Amy or Samantha or Stephen or whoever it is.
It's not about an objective truth. It's about a subjective truth.
I believe so. And I get very string theory about that. I get very quantum about that. And I don't want to be the hokey guy that's like, everything's quantum connected. But when I am in this space, everything is definitely connected. And why not quantumly? I don't know why that word doesn't fit. So the answer to why build our own religion, I think we already do. We already have them. I think we do incessantly and consciously and subconsciously throughout our lives. I want to point out things in your room right now and in the offices I've seen you have over the years. You have Tyrannosaurus Rex background sometimes. You have this art. What is that in the background? And I think we can scripture while we hang decorations on our wall and when we live every day and when we write, when we journal, when we meet, whatever we give our time and attention and focus to is part of that intelligence that we've been talking about, and that's God. I think God is an emergent system that comes about by our worship. And how do we worship? With our time, with our focus, with our effort, and by concentrating our beliefs into certain principles and ethos. That is the pure religion. And then where it gets all mucked up is when we start saying God is this being that's in our image and like us. I don't want to bash on the Bible, but I don't want to just accept everything in there. I think that the Bible and other ancient scripture are written with the best knowledge and abilities they had at their time. And it's this foolish thing to say, okay, now we can't write our own scripture just because scripture already exists. That would be such a foolish thought too. Does that make sense? So I'm for the Bible as the wisdom of the people of that time. I am not going to accept every tenet of it as anything but a result of the people of that time.
So
Back to this story.
So did you have to go through all? So like back to the story, because you just said is related to it though, because they at least handcuff, pardon the Freudian slip, in terms of like locking down the business, right? They make it almost impossible to operate. You have to
be clear,
so you filed the court case on them, right?
Physically, but yes, they were doing all that they could to stop this. Yes.
And then so you filed the court case, you go to court, and then basically they sit there and they basically go, okay. I mean, they try to their prerogative essentially, or their goal there is to just prove you're a drug dealer effectively.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. That was their goal. So yes, they basically accused
they
me
needed
of
to
the worst
debunk
that they could. a drug dealer. I think I should say the next little miracle that happened was we filed for a temporary restraining order and for preliminary injunctions. Now,
against who?
What's that?
Against whom?
Against the city of Provo, the mayor, councilman, the individual officers. Initially, I took the officers off in the long run because they're just following orders, and I didn't ever feel completely.
Well, how are they going to come get treatment if they're in a restraining order?
More than you know. I've been providing treatment for everyone. Let's say. I want to reveal things right now, but I'm like, no, well, leave that. But when it comes to government and church and people, more than you know, they need treatment as much as anybody. Yeah. So that said, I filed a temporary restraining order, which essentially is the same thing that a girl gets against a male stalker that's like trying to ruin their lives or kill them. And I got a temporary restraining order on the 13th after a big hearing and cross-examination and trying to tear apart our sincerity. And the truth is, okay, I told you I'm fighting my own feelings of self-deception, and that now I'm more confident than ever in our position. But I legitimately sat there while being cross-examined, humbled, and going, look, if this isn't religion, I would like to know it. And they were saying, your drugs are dangerous. They probably have fentanyl in them. Your Honor, he's got to have fentanyl. And I go, well, if that's true too, I do want to know it. Could you? And I was like, definitely. Could you guys test them for me? Which they did. And I got test results back about my mushrooms from the finest labs in criminal lab that show that we have the best mushrooms and that it's 100% pure and safe. And they hated to admit that, but now I have the testing to show it and prove it, which is fantastic. But they were issued a temporary restraining order against them. And then that is when, so the next week, the judge said to them, I find them to be sincere. I find them to cause no harm, which is a judge's way of saying safe. I find them to be credible witnesses and that you have created harm and that your harm will be, all of the things required for a TRO we met. And then she ordered them to return the mushrooms. And she suggested
the government gave you back mushrooms.
They fought it for 3 more months and then were ordered to a second time and then did so. And
they did. You should have framed them. You're the only guy that's ever pulled that off.
Right? It's something. It's not nothing. So I want to say something's happening down here. It's a change. Now, to do this, she had to look really hard at our religion. Sure. And the prior definition of religion includes that it answers the questions to life's the biggest questions in life. And they asked me in court, do you know the answer to life's biggest questions? And I said, no, don't know. That'd be ridiculous. That would be amazing. Is kind of my attitude towards that.
Such a good idea.
Right. But I don't want to claim to. Now, that was my answer since they were really trying hard. They kept telling me one answer, yes or no questions, please. And I'd be like, I couldn't answer yes or no questions. It just was impossible. So I would give one-liners and they had a hard time with that. So I said, they asked me if I was a prophet. That was another one of the criteria, that it's founded by a prophet or somebody that claims. And I said, no more or less than every other voyager is a prophet. In our religion, everyone is the prophet. Now, we have a simple governance system that governs all of these voyagers that come in and are prophets. So and do you have scripture? They said no. Did they say you have a place of worship or a church? And I said yes. And they said no. They said a place of worship can't be below a business, in a business park, below a foot and ankle center. That's what they literally said. They're like, you're below a foot and ankle center. They tried to make it sound gross. And I'm like, no, we have a beautiful temple that we have built and we care about and we worship in. All of this, they didn't accept, but the judge did. They issued a TRO and suggested we mediate and work it out between us. And I went to them the next week and I offered $0 mediation. I said, I will handle my lawyer fees, which in less than a month was already 60 grand. And I said, I'll handle that. Just let's settle, people. Mm-hmm. And they instead filed charges against me. They filed a motion to dismiss after we won the TRO. Then they filed an expedited discovery process. Then they put more lawyers on the case and were approved for more money to prosecute, including my case. And they then doubled down. And they did this on December 23rd. And they wanted to interrogate us over the holidays. They said in the next 2 weeks, we would like interviews and names and lists. They're like the Gestapo asking for names. And I shouldn't say that. That might be a little far. I don't think they wanted to kill me, but to ask the names of this sensitive population. And then they said, if we are unwilling to give our names, doesn't that show that we're insincere and we don't really believe in all this? They put this is all in writing. I'm not I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not misrepresenting their argument. And then we argued that the judge didn't issue any of these, denied those requests, allowed them to keep the mushrooms for a little longer, but said, we're going to see if you make any good points between now and when I order you to. And later she ordered them to return them. So I got them back. I think it was March 4th. That I got them back, or March 2nd or 4th, those two numbers ring a date. And we won this on, this is a fun note that's making me more and more of a believer in the mystic and magic all the time. But this huge trial and the cross-examination happened on the 44th anniversary on Friday, December 13th, 44 years after my parents got married and the night I was conceived. And it happened a quarter mile from where I was born 9 months later. It was just beautiful. It was like, and my parents were watching, their LDS members and excited. And they were like, go Bridger, we're so excited. They watched the whole thing the whole day because I don't know, I didn't do much sports growing up. They didn't spectate that, but now they're sure watching this thing in my adult life and with great amounts of support. And I had tons of supporters log on to this Zoom meeting. And I got to give a shout out to the other people that were cross-examined. Brandy, my girlfriend, and the lead facilitator, and Jenna, and all the others who were ready to come in our defense were amazing. And they grilled Brandy harder than they grilled me. I think they wish they would have. They think they thought they could get her. But the answers were all over the board. They'd ask Brandy, do you believe in God? And she'd be like, I believe in all the gods. And then they'd ask Jenna, and Jenna would be like, no, I don't believe in God. And then they'd ask me, and I'm like, well, it's complicated. Define God, define belief. And while we're at it, could you define who I am too? Like, I want to know. And then we can talk about whether I believe in God. That's a lot of questions to answer. So,
wait, this is now in, you mentioned NPR, Rolling Stone. Why? What's the significant impact in the interest that actually, I mean, because if I heard correctly, you actually, this had more writing on like your facility. There's more writing on this that's actually like even changing the legal code to some extent, isn't there?
The reason is because the definition of religion was very myopic before this. This case, though I did not know it would, has expanded That's the word they would use. Some people have said redefined or expanded the very definition of what a religion is, because the judge then looked at this criteria and said, well, the definition, according to what's called the Myers precedent or the Myers case, is that a religion must claim to answer all of life's biggest universal questions. And then among that, there's a number of other traditional things, claiming to be a prophet or scripture or holidays, things like that. But the biggest one was claiming to answer all of life's universal questions, biggest questions. And when I said no, I think we were so sincere and honest and raw that the judge looked at this. Now, this is absolutely true. The judge looked at this and said, okay, they don't, first of all, as a judge, she gets to examine whether that criteria is her criteria. Then she gets to examine whether or not we meet it, and then whether or not that criteria is absolutely necessary, if every part of that is. But comparing us against that, she said they meet a fair amount of this criteria, but this one, she said, on that criteria, she said, I'm going to rule this to be existentially humble. When a religion can say they don't claim to know those things with certainty and applicable to everyone else, that is an existentially humble religion. And then she says, and I'm paraphrasing, but she says very directly that she's not going to hold it against singularism because we are existentially humble. And so that criteria, whether she has to obey it or not, she rules that no one should hold this against us. Now that was what law periodicals and blogs and people that understand this case say, wow, that's a new definition and a new precedent. And it's also a new precedent, not just legally, but behaviorally. She ordered that they return my mushrooms, and she also ordered that according to Utah state evidence law, I am the owner of them legally, and that they must, in all technicality, return that evidence that was taken because I have ownership of it, and they were forced to return it. So that is amazing. I got it on video when I picked them up from the evidence lab, and so I'll be releasing that. Maybe I should send you a clip.
Send me a clip. I'd love to see that. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Why didn't you quit?
Why don't I
$60,000
quit?
in legal fees in a month? That's.
Oh yeah, it's around $200,000 now. It's climbing. I can no longer go to the city and settle for $0. It would.
Yeah.
It's beyond what I could afford. Okay. The question is, why not quit?
Yeah.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to. And I mean that very sincerely and literally. Like, what would I do the next day? I don't want to. I don't want to quit. I don't.
Right? I'm going.
What's that?
I know that feeling. I'm just like,
yeah.
I don't know what else to do. This is the best idea I have right now. I don't know what else I'd be doing.
Yes. Okay. This is the best idea I have. Yes. I can see you have fervently thought through the same in your life.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have those answers if you're entirely practical. If this podcast is about people that have insanely pursued their endeavors, I don't consider myself radical. I think all of my choices are balanced. I consider landing in one place and forever making that the precedent and law and never changing it. That's radical. That's an absolute. Yeah. People that find moderation appear to be radical while the movement is becoming more moderate like them. So I don't consider myself radical, but I do look at this and I say, it appears to be illegal in my profession to be insincere, but it's not illegal to be insane. And so what kind of law have we made that encourages insanity as a higher level than sincerity?
Yeah.
And I go, that's what's insane here, is that it's not illegal for me to be insane, but it would be illegal for me to be insincere, but not insane. That's an ironic thing, isn't it? Yeah. So I've arrived at that point where I go, okay, I've lost everything else a few times in my life. I don't know what else I think I have to lose that is greater than what I've already accomplished with Singularism in a year and a half. I like this as the legacy, and my bigger question now, Dan, is not what would how do I keep going? It's whether or not I've already made the biggest difference I'm going to, and whether or not I am just going to continue to practice privately, or whether or not this grows and becomes a sustainable, long-term, real. I say real, I believe it's already real, but
It's real.
I suppose
You're
it's also
licensed.
in the survival of this organization that I think it becomes increasingly real and legitimate.
So,
And
like,
that's my
are
big
you the
question.
only licensed federally? Like, what is the status of the?
We are the only. So in all of history, I am open to corrections on this. Somebody the other day tried to call me out on this on a TikTok
Uh,
and said, "You're not the only religion with a federal court order." And I said, "Right, but my TikTok said we are the only federally protected religion that has ever won the right to utilize psilocybin in our ceremonies."
huh.
And that is true. People have won on peyote. People have won on ayahuasca. People have not won organizationally at a federal level. And we can find no cases, and I have paid lawyers to look to to find one case of. So we are the first, we are the largest to federally have our religion recognized the right to use psilocybin specifically. And that's an accomplishment. And I'm happy to set that precedent, even at the cost of our financial uh, ruin. I believe we will survive this, but it has not been easy, and it has been emotional. And there has been a lot of uncertainty. It's easy right now to say, okay, we won.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of worry and doubt and stress, because I'm a dad
Mm-hmm.
first. I don't consider any role in my life greater than that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what I do. And to think that I would have to stop all of that and go to jail, and the upper limit of that is for 15 years. They filed a Class B felony, which is a 15 years sentence. Um, that's serious. I lost sleep over this, even at the threat. I've never even been charged with anything, let alone the threat of a felony. It's been hard emotionally, financially, and they did this on purpose to shut this down. And the judge ruled that it constitutes harassment, and that what she said was that it is ironic, given this state's history with religious protection, that the state would act so aggressively or assertively. I can't remember the exact word, I'm paraphrasing, but would act so aggressively and assertively to utilize the coercive power of its criminal justice system to harass and shut down a small religion that they find offensive. That's a quote from the judge. And that is true. It is ironic that the state of Utah should forget its own history with religious freedom and then pursue this so blindly without asking me. They never asked me one question about the sincere religiosity of this at all, ever,
Mm-hmm.
that I am aware. And if they did, they certainly didn't put that. I can tell you one thing. I shouldn't say. My lawyer would say, no, you don't have to tell that one. But they sent in. We believe that they sent in a number of undercover people
Mm-hmm.
the first year we were organized, and that they never made it through our filtering system. We never gave them psilocybin. They didn't make it through our system. And so when they sent the most recent undercover person, they said, don't ask any questions. Don't try to get through the process. Just just ask him if that's what he does. And then they came back, and then the prosecutor was quite anxious to prosecute. So much so that it came in a form of retaliation for us winning the TRO against him. And then he tried to double down and then lost again. So right now, Provo City and Utah County are in a bit of a pickle because I think the truth is that the plaintiffs, the defendants in my case, would like to settle and would like to end this. And it's hard for governments to make any decisions, let alone one like this. And they haven't been able to come to a settlement agreement. I think that that's sad. I would like
ongoing.
I would be so reasonable. I'm not the guy that's like, I read about these things where people like trip on the sidewalk and win like $6 million from the government. And I'm like, dude, I just kind of want to be, I'm not looking for some big settlement.
Pursuit of happiness here, right?
Yes. I am so reasonable about it.
How many people do you turn away for? How many go through the process? Like, do you know what your like screening rate is, or your disqualification rate?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, people are screened, they watch our webinar and they're screened, and then they fill out the form, and then they're screened, and then they, make an appointment with us, and then we screen them again. And so by the time they've made it through our filters, I bet you that we're turning away, politely telling them that it's not the right fit,
sure.
Maybe 25% for any one of the 6 reasons I mentioned earlier. And them being sincerity even. I'm not looking for recreational seekers. I'm not looking for people that it's unsafe for, or people that it won't be likely to help. I'm not looking for anyone that it's not ethical to treat or that aren't committed to themselves in this process. We're looking for people that we can really help. So that said, we turn away a fair amount, and then a fair amount find that we're not the perfect resource for them either. People come in and they're like, well, could we incorporate some sort of like a drum ceremony in my psilocybin session? And I'm like, oh, you're looking for a different kind of healer. I support that. We're looking for the religious, make a difference, meditate deeply. And you don't have to be a meditation professional to meditate deeply. We'll help you with that. You're more of a meditator than you know, in all probability. But yes, we are looking for the right people and in sincerity. So
good man. I appreciate it. How do people find you? How do they, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, singularism.org. And if you want to know the summation of where we are, we're growing. We are training practitioners now. We are certifying people. We have more people coming on board than ever. I'm granting more interviews with yourself and others. NPR came out with something yesterday about us. And the other day I spoke with Harvard Law. I've now spoken with Harvard Law, Harvard Divinity School, Psychedelic Bar Association, and we're just growing, and our supporters are growing. We have a GoFundMe if you want to support this mission. I would love you to support this mission. Reach out and find us on singularism.org. We would love all the support we can get. So
awesome. Yeah. It's a good place to end, my friend. I appreciate you. You are hell to talk to. That is an awesome story. Anybody else listening, go check out singularism.org. If you're in Utah nearby, I'm sure you can call them and watch the webinars regardless of where you are. And awesome. You're a legend, buddy. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Let's do this again soon.
Done and done.